All right, folks, welcome back to another edition of the show, Midweek with Eric Smith. And thanks again to all of you who are joining in to watch tonight's episode. Thanks again to everybody who's joined me to this point. And my guest tonight is director, producer, writer, one of Hollywood's finest, and he's a Canadian kid as well, Brad Peyton. And Brad, on cue, is ready to go right from the mix right now, and we will get going with Mr. Peyton.
Am I in?
Hey,
am I in?
You are in.
Oh, sweet. I'm also.
You hearing me all right?
I'm also a Newfoundlander. I like to add that hyphen behind Canadian.
Yes. Well, I mean, Newfoundlanders are a breed of their own, right? They're not just Canadians. You guys have your own little thing going. It's one of the few provinces I still have yet to get to.
It's well, now we're not friends, and and yeah, we have our own island. That's how cool we are.
Let me ask you this, Brad, and I'm going to start right from the get-go. I don't know if you've watched any of these. I'm sure you got 1,000 better things to be doing at 7 o'clock Pacific time on a weeknight than watching my Instagram feed.
Well, during quarantine, it's mostly been a little wine. That's my that's the go-to at 7 o'clock.
All right. Well, hey, feel free to have a glass while we're going here. I like kind of looking big picture with guys and trying to see where they got their start. So before we get to your film career, and I want to talk about the movies you've made and the television shows, et cetera, and what you're working on now. Sure. Where did it all start for you as a kid, as you said, a Newfoundlander growing up in Gander? How do you go from kid who loves comics to one day going to film school to one day making big time motion pictures in Hollywood that are grossing nearly $500 million?
Oh, wow. I mean, it's a long and windy road, honestly. Like, it's one of those things that, it was very much like, looking back on it, I had to, I guess, be somewhat delusional and naive to even think like, oh, there's a possibility of pulling this off. Like what could I possibly do? How could I possibly make it? I will say that it's like, there's one big event for me that like solidified the whole path to this gigantic quarantine beard in Los Angeles, which is I went to Dalhousie University in Halifax, and I was there, and I had 2 part-time jobs since I was in grade 9, because we didn't have a lot of money, and I wanted to save up and do stuff and go places and that kind of stuff and have spending money. And when I spent basically all of the money I'd saved for like 4 years to go to university for a year in Halifax, which was a big thing for a kid, that didn't have a lot of exposure to the world, and was coming from Gander, which was about 9,000, 10,000 people. And I got there, and university was completely nothing like what I expected it to be. So for me, I kind of like lived it up and like partied up in grade 12 in high school, and kind of got that out of my system. And thought, oh, university is where you go to get ready to have a job and like be a real human being and like an adult. And I got there, and it was like a whole bunch of people that had not had the high school experience I had had, and were like ready to party. And I was like, man, this isn't what I thought it was going to be at all. And I realized when I was there, I was like, this isn't for me. Like this world, this like sitting in a class of 150 people, doing like, 10 courses that I'm not passionate about and one that I am. And then I did the math, like, well, what am I going to get out of this, right? Like, what is the job at the end of this road? Like, where is this leading me? And I could not see a future that would make me happy. And so then I started going on these really long walks, because again, like, I don't even have a pedal bike, like I live in Halifax. I've been dropped off by my parents. I don't own a car. That's like a total fantasy at this point in my life to like own a vehicle. I don't even have a bike. So I'm walking around Halifax, like long walks, like hours, walking around seeing Halifax. And I'm doing this the whole time. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Like, what am I doing here? Like, like what's my life going to be, And I'm spending all this money, which I saved. It wasn't like I was spending my parents' money. It was, I mean, they gave me some, but it was largely the money I'd saved up. And, sure. And then I was like, okay, the question I asked myself over and over was like, what will make you happy when you're 25, 35, 45, 55, 65, and so on. And, you know, that was the question I posed. I literally posed that to myself in that way. And I thought, like, okay, you know, that's the question I need to ask, because that's the thing that I'm going to do that's going to make me happy. And the only answer I could come up with was filmmaker. And it seemed kind of obvious at that point, because I had to like really kind of think about like, what do I really, really, really want? Like, or what do I need more than even what do I want? You know, like, what do I really need? And that's kind of the decision that put me on the road. Then it was like literally for the next 10 years, 15 years, whatever, however long it's been, the whole thing for me now is just outwork everybody all the time. Just regardless of the situation, regardless how successful you get, just outwork everybody all the time. And you never know what can happen, because I never thought I would be in Hollywood. I never thought I would make these movies. I never thought any of this was even when I started. I never thought any of this was possible. I just didn't know what was possible and what wasn't you know, what I could achieve, what I couldn't achieve. So I just went constantly, like just constantly on a warpath of trying to get a movie made and trying to prove that what I thought was an innate ability as a storyteller and a deep-seated passion for film was going to lead me somewhere. So that was sort of the moment that I was like, all right.
Let me ask you this, though. Before you go on that big walk and you had that sort of epiphany then, when you're heading into university and you're in Halifax, was the dream going in to be making movies, to be making television, and whether it be in Canada? What was the dream at that point before you had this eye-opening experience?
I mean, I think I was being sadly like not inspirational and kind of a realist, and thinking, well, I'm really good in English and I'm a pretty good writer, and so I should probably go get like a bachelor's of English, you know, and I'll study philosophy. And then it wasn't really like, no one had pointed me in a direction of like, oh, this is the job you should get. They just said, you're good at these things, go do this thing. And then I became very pragmatic, because I looked at not that moment, but the long scape of where is this road going to lead me. And that's when I realized, man, I can't be on this road. This isn't the right one for me. I didn't really, going into university, I didn't really have like this is the path. Or this is the goal. I just had, this is the path. And everyone was saying, yeah, go down that path. You're good at these things. You've read book, you know, like you've been an avid reader since you're a giant nerd. Go to school and write, and, you know, be a teacher or something. And I just went and was like, no, this isn't for me at all.
So when you take that walk and you have the epiphany, how quickly do you make the decision then to get out of Halifax, to get out of Dalhousie, and to ultimately find your way to film school in Toronto?
Well, I didn't I instantly changed everything I was doing, like instantly, like the next day. But I didn't this was, what the problem with the situation is, I realized this within like 3 weeks of being there. So it was like, oh, I'm not going to tell mom and dad that I'm not going to go back until next summer, you know, when I'm done this. But, and I don't want like to give kids the wrong idea, but like I basically, but I still maintained good grades, but I did as little as humanly possible to get those good grades. Right. Which was, again, basically like high school for me. It was like, okay, great. Like, I know how this is going to go. I'm going to do good on the test. I'm going to write a decent paper. I'm going to get like a B+ average or whatever, but like, I'm not going to sink in. I'm not.
Yeah, you're just going to get by.
Yeah, I'm just not passionate about this. Yeah. So I changed everything in terms of how I spent my extra time. I learned these skills that I, thank God, have not had to use in a long time, but have really enabled me to be successful at my job, which was I would just I would look up who was in Halifax, you know, because again, it was Gander, Newfoundland, 9,000 people, to Halifax. And at least in Halifax, I thought, oh, there's probably some sort of television and film industry. And of course it was small, but I used that to my advantage. And I would cold call people by looking up their credits and then ask them if I could take them for a coffee. And I would like do this with the head of the Writers Guild. I mean, I did it with as many people that would like spare me an hour, you know?
Right.
And I just got like, people would step in and like, tell me what books to read and what maybe do a course and like take an acting course or take a screenwriting course or do this workshop. And, you know, And then basically every single minute that I didn't have to be at Dal, I was doing that stuff. And I literally just was in my dorm room writing all the time. I started writing screenplays instantly, basically trying to teach. And, this is everything like trying to figure out how to format a screen. Like this isn't the era that I'm in now, right? Like I couldn't go online and get scripts. First of all, the internet at that point was a closed internet at Dal. I couldn't search the interweb.
Yeah.
Like this was a new concept.
Yes.
So just finding all of this stuff was like incredible. I remember having the Alien and the Aliens hard copy of the scripts printed. And those are my guidelines of like, these are two fantastic scripts that I love these movies that have slightly different tones and are written in different ways. One by James Cameron and one is Ed O'Bannon, and I can't remember his co-writer, but it's like, those were my guidelines. I couldn't search online, and I'm the nerd kid in my small town who's inviting all their friends over to watch the behind the scenes making of movies. So I'm the only person I know who even does that stuff, so it was a really steep and difficult learning curve just to figure out how to go down the path in a practical way. Like, how do you begin writing? How do you do all that? And so I didn't leave Halifax for like 4 or 5 months. I just literally started this trajectory of like, okay, well, I need to educate myself while I'm in Halifax with everything I can that's in Halifax that I won't be able to find in Gander. Now, and remember, like, again, growing up in a different era, I think I knew one guy with a video camera when I was growing up. So for me, when I went home, I knew none of this is going to happen. Hey, you're going to see all your friends and you're just going to hang out and have like a summer, when you're 17 years old. And then the second thing is that there's no screenwriters in Gander. There's no, none of that's going to go on. So I kind of used the time in Halifax to just soak up other professionals' time and do everything I could, at least to move in the right direction.
It's funny. I'm sitting here listening to you recount, especially the internet component of the story and trying to find information. You and I are pretty much the same age. I'm a couple of years older than you, but I tell people all the time, going to journalism school in Toronto at Humber College and having to go to the computer lab to surf the web and that one rich kid that was in the residence that had dial-up internet, and you're watching, the frame by frame by frame of the picture loading on the screen. And I mean, all of my papers that I did, all of the articles I wrote for the school newspaper, whatever, it was on like a dot matrix printer. Right. I wasn't even on a laptop. I was on a word processor. Right. And I remember scrounging up enough money, I think in year 2, with money and help from my parents to buy a laptop for like $3,000.
Oh, wow.
And I actually had a computer. It was unbelievable that I had a computer. But it's so funny to think, and I'll maybe get to this later when we talk about actual filmmaking, to think where technology has come in a relatively short amount of time in terms of just for the average Joe at home access to information, let alone the technology that exists within your realm now within filmmaking. It's taken off like gangbusters in a relatively short amount of time in only 20 years basically.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy difference. I mean, just the access to information.
Yeah.
Like, even if you take out the technological component in terms of the actual technology, if you just think about the access to information, it's a completely and totally different world.
So after Dalhousie, then that first year, you go back home to Gander before you go to Toronto?
I go to Gander and I'm a tour guide for the summer.
Okay. Now, how does the conversation, though, go with your parents in terms of this might not be for me and I'm looking to kind of do a 180 or at least pick another fork in the road?
Oh, it's pretty rough, man. It doesn't go well. I wasn't I wasn't a troublemaking kid, but I hung out with some troublemaking kids.
Okay.
And so I feel like they might have been worried about just like, could they trust? I mean, maybe I'm not a dad, I don't really know yet, but like maybe every parent feels this way when their kid becomes like 16 or 17. Because first of all, when you're 16 and 17, you just think you know everything. There's no way anyone's going to tell you otherwise. And, I think that's like this innate thing that you have to have just to get over the fear of probably going out into the world. I think it's like you overcompensate with just pure, like, I've got it figured out, and you like charge off, But I don't think they necessarily took me that seriously at first. they were upset because, you know, I remember I knew it was going to break my dad's heart because I was saying, he would always say to me, oh, you're going to be the first Peyton with a degree, you know? And I was like, oh God, this is going to be rough, you know? But I don't think they took me seriously until the summer was coming to an end. And I said, you know, listen, this isn't going to go well if I stay here. You know, like I'd seen people older than me kind of like let their passion and life kind of fizzle.
Okay.
And it's not a good look. Like it's, you know, it's just not, I mean, I'm sure you knew people like this too, that just end up like staying home with their parents for that year that turns into 2. And like, I'm a sensitive, pretty artistic kid that has like traveled enough to see how great the world out there can be, but hasn't found a way to get where I want to go yet. So I'm presenting them with this option of like, you need to help me figure out how to get to Toronto to try to go to film school, or I don't think I'm going to be very good staying here in Gander. Like, I just don't know what my future is going to be at all. And I don't want to go back to Dalhousie because I now have no money and I don't want to get in debt and, you know, like all of the normal reasons. So it was a bit like, I saw them panic a little bit, to be honest with you, but then they helped me. Like I tried to get into Ryerson. I was too late. Honestly, my submission got lost in the mail and they said they didn't even get it. And I was kind of heartbroken because that was the only, I'd researched all the schools and that was the one I really wanted to go to. And I just decided, well, you know, I'm not going to stay in Gander. So I ended up getting into Humber College and taking night courses in order to, they said they would look at my submission for Ryerson the following like semester or whatever. Someone dropped out, they would let me get in. And so I went to Humber College. I moved to Toronto on my own, which was another culture shock entirely. Just figuring out how to use the the tokens to get onto the first time I ever went on the first probably 10 times I ever got on the subway. I got on the subway, and then when I went to get and transfer onto a bus, I didn't transfer, I bought another ticket. Like, so I did that. Yeah, I know you laugh, asshole. Like 10, 20 times I did that. Yeah. I was like, and then they're like, and some nice lady one time was like, you know, once you get on, you just hold the paper and they'll let you on the bus. And I was like, yeah. Oh my God, I've spent
the money you lost.
I spent so much money. I have no money. Honestly, man, like the thing that stands out to me the most about that time is I remember this, and this is not an exaggeration. I had $40 a week for groceries. Oh. Yeah, $40 a week. I might spend $40 on drinks the next time I see you.
You better.
Yeah, exactly, right? We would if I spent less, you wouldn't like me. It's like, no, it's like, it's to putting it in perspective. It's like to be 17 and to move to Toronto with no friends and no support system from being from Gander. That was 100,000 times more culture shock than Halifax.
No, I don't doubt that. And that was your first time in Toronto?
You know, I probably transferred flights with my parents as a kid, okay. But I didn't have family there. So I'd never I didn't have any experience there that I could recall, you know? So that was completely culture shock. That was a very, very rough time for a minute because it was just simply figuring it all out.
So, all right. So then take me through the transition from move to Toronto, night courses at Humber, didn't get into Ryerson, but ultimately landing in film school in Toronto and getting to where you wanted to be in terms of studying that specifically at the Canadian Film Center.
Well, so I ended up getting into, so I'll cut this part pretty short, but I got into Ryerson, didn't have a great experience. Again, you know, this is one of these things where it's like everybody in the film industry, it's not like probably what journalism is like, where it's like, you don't need a diploma to be a great anything in the film industry, you know, like you end up mostly like apprenticing with people and like working your way up. What I didn't know at the time, what I learned in Toronto was that you didn't need a diploma. So it ended up not mattering where you wanted to go. And then the other thing that was an advantage to me is, you know, that $40 a week budget for food. It's like I needed to have a career. Like I needed to go somewhere. I needed to go there pretty quick. And I just basically started cutting to the chase of like, I can't sit around in school for 4 years. I got to figure this out. And so I dropped out of school and I requested some of my tuition back. And I got that back, and I ended up taking my money and writing and living off of it and writing a grant to make a short film. And the great thing about the Canadian system for film is that they support the arts. You know, Canada is amazing at supporting the arts, and they don't give you a lot of money, but you don't need a lot of money when you're a kid trying to make a short film. So it was like Canada Council grants. I think I might have gotten Ontario Arts Council grant. I got a little bit from the Newfoundland government, and I ended up going to make a short film. And it was okay. I mean, there was like 2 scenes I was really proud of, and there was a bunch of scenes that didn't turn out the way I wanted because it was, I ran out of time, and, you know, again, no money, and everyone's just pulling in favors, but it looked good. And I worked with a professional DP and sound team and all that to make sure like it looked good. And then I submitted to the Film Center. And when I went to the Film Center, I think what got me in was my interview, because my answers are just quirky yet specific enough to, I think, interest them. You know, like at the time I was a huge fan of Tim Burton, and I kind of vibed like him, and that was what my early work was really like. And it was mostly because I really love outsider stories, is what I've learned now. It's just like I love kind of like social injustice and outsider stories and people like not really feeling like they belong. And I just related to those stories, and I think Burton did those really well. And so did David Lynch, and there's like famous filmmakers that did it. But so my interview went really well, and I got in, and I was the youngest person, I think, to this day that's ever gotten in. And that was like shocking, but in a really exciting way, because what I learned at the Film Center, which really impacted me in a massive way, is I was the youngest kid. I was like 23 or 24 years old. And there were people 10 years my senior. Most people were probably 10 years older than me at the Film Center. Because what the Film Center was it was almost like a finishing school, right? Where it was like you had to have a career at a certain place to get in so that your skills could be polished. I was lucky enough to have shot a film that showed promise in my skills off my very first film. So I'd only made one film. I'd never made anything besides this short film. Now, I had made little tiny things at home, like just like, you know, fussing around and learning lenses and like little things, but like never really finished a short film. I had attempted to finish one with like literally no money, like $100, and it didn't finish it. And so when I set off and I made this one, like I can't stress, like it wasn't like I was trying to get on base. It was like I was trying to hit a home run.
Okay.
Like every single step at the beginning, and really still to this day, it's like I'm not trying to just be in the game. I'm trying to like leave an impact, you know? And so at that point, when I made that first short, I was swinging for the fences. When I got into the Film Center, I was like, I have to swing for the fence. I mean, like this, like I have no chance. I have no money. I literally broke. I'm like, I tell people this story, and I wish I need to think about who can corroborate the story. But like, I used to live in a basement apartment, and I had no furniture. I had a TV on a TV stand with I think a VCR. I don't even think I had a DVD player. And I had a bed I had like mattresses, but no bed frame. I had no furniture. Okay. I had no money. When people are like, oh yeah, you had, you know, it was probably hard. I was like, you don't understand.
Yeah.
I had no money. And I went to the Film Center and spent all of my money at the Film Center and getting to and from the Film Center and eat. Like it was kind of like rough going. So I was like, I need to like swing for the fences. So for me, I was in this environment where there were a bunch of people that were older than me, and I think tentative, right? They were scared of making fools of themselves. They were like, they had enough experience and knowledge to know kind of like what you should and shouldn't do. And I was not tentative at all. I was like, I'm going to do everything and anything. I literally remember we had an exercise where we all drew emotions out of a hat, and we were given 400 feet of film to try to capture that emotion. And I was insanely overjoyed. I thought I was never going to see another foot of film in my life ever again. And that mindset made me like, I literally went for broke every time. And sometimes, man, I failed so badly. I remember doing a couple like exercises at the Film Center. We do kind of like scenes or almost like short stories or short films, but they were almost always like an encapsulated scene. I did one, And it was like there was like marbles rolling in slow motion and like just not, just absolute garbage, like, but I was going for it, I was really like attempting to do something. And when I failed, I would just be like, oh well, like, man, I really went for that. Like, not that I felt like my ideas were necessarily flawed, but my execution was flawed. And so I was like learning, I was like taking leaps and bounds in my ability because I was like really messing up. And I also learned things like, we get exercises where someone would give you a script and you'd have to shoot it. And I remember I insulted a guy because I was like, man, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand the comedy, like whatever. You learn these lessons of like, oh, I got to like be careful how I talk to writers about their scripts. And like, again, like I have no experience. I did a short film that I wrote, so like learning through that was eye-opening, and I learned a lot. But the biggest thing for me was that I just literally swung for the fences, no fear at any step. I mean, like everybody else, I had the fear of failure, and I didn't want to fail. I was trying really hard to succeed, but I wasn't reserving anything. I was going for it, and that's the thing that I think stuck with me the most at the Film Center. And then when I got to make, we went in and pitched thesis short films. And at that time, only 5 people of the 8, which was really sad, got to make their short films. But it was because, it was expensive to make short films and it was all on film and blah, blah. And I went in and I pitched this idea that I really loved. And I, again, made this short film called Evelyn. And it was like it did really well for me. And again, I just went for broke. Like, I was just like, what can I possibly do with $12,000, which was our budget, that is going to like blow people away? And I called in every favor, and like I got my roommate to do the costumes, and I cut out all the props and painted them all myself, and I designed all the sets myself, and I just did whatever I had to do. And the thing that sticks with me with that part of my life was I remember my roommate. I had 2 roommates at that time, this French guy from Quebec and a guy that I know from Newfoundland. And I remember that, man, they came home so many nights with wine, just being like, yeah, it's the good stuff, come. And I would just be like, oh, I got to sit here and design this set. Like, man, like I can't. I got a storyboard. I got a shot list. Like, I didn't want to mess up my chance, And so when people see Evelyn, what they don't realize is that every single shot that I made, minus one insert of her opening the door handle as like an insert shot of her opening the door handle, every single shot I shot is in that short film. There is no fat. There's no fat because there was no money. And I had to learn, like, how do you make a film when you don't have any resources? And how do you make it count? And that's what I carried into my career in Hollywood, where it was like, you just don't go into it thinking with excess. You go into it pinpointing what you need and what you want, and you go after executing that at the highest level and not fucking around,
Let me ask you this, and I say this respectfully to your classmates, your colleagues, etc. Was there any resentment when you've got this young guy coming in that's just kind of, as you said, going for broke and trying to go balls to the wall, and then on top of that, correct me if I'm wrong with my chronology here, but like a year into film school, it was 2002 that you did Evelyn, and suddenly now it's being played at TIFF and whatnot, and you're getting, you're critically acclaimed basically a year into your time at the film school. And as you said, you're this young kid that's 10 years younger than most of the people there. Did they pat you on the back and have your back, or was there some resentment there?
I don't remember any pats on the back. No, honestly, I was in this year with the directors, and there was I was in a year with Sarah Polley as a director, and I was in that year. So Sarah came in, and I only knew her as an actor, and was like, oh my God, she's famous, as a Canadian kid, I was like, holy crap, she's famous. And there was, she was, very talented right away. You could tell because she had so much experience. I believe even at that point on both sides of the camera. And there was another director who was also an ex-actor, and he had a lot of experience. And so I just assumed they were better than me. And I was just like, no, I don't feel any pressure to be good here because I just accepted that they're going to be better than me. And then in our very first exercise, we had to do like a visual exercise. And in that, I suddenly realized just trying to be objective, and I can tell you what I sensed then is similar to what I feel now. Was when everyone saw those first exercises, it was obvious that I visually had talent. I could tell a story visually, and I had a sense, like I had an eye. And I think instantly I was put on other people's radars, and that's when I went, oh crap, like I might actually be decent, you know, like because some people shoot stuff and it's just very, you know, it doesn't have a lot of flavor or style to it, you know, and storytelling, visual storytelling is literally like trying to distill down the story into just key images, you know, and so that gave me confidence. But I also at the same time just assumed that these two or three other people were going to be way better than me every step of the way. And so when I made Evelyn, I think 3 or 4 of us got into TIFF because again, I looked at myself as like, oh, I'm lucky to get a bronze, which is very Canadian of me because it's like in America it's like gold or nothing. If you don't win, you lose, you know. And I was just happy to kind of place and just get in. And so that I think kind of subdued any sensation of, oh, like people might resent me. I maybe they did. I don't know. I just assumed. From my point of view, it was like these people are better than me, and I'll be lucky to keep in the same lane as them. You know.
Right.
So then I just focused on, well, what do I need to figure out while I'm here? Because let's just assume they're going to be better than me. I'm just going to focus on what am I going to do. And so yeah, there was not really a lot of that. You know, the thing that I ran into, which was interesting, was that I a year after Evelyn, I sold a script to Sony, and I made like more money than I thought I would ever make my entire life, which wasn't a lot of money, but at the time was like, oh my God, this is crazy. You know, like I can't believe it. And I'll tell you the interesting thing. No one believed me. I literally, my friends, literally, I'm not kidding. I'm not being like, this isn't like, oh, they sort of thought this. They literally thought I was lying to them. So just imagine this, man. Imagine I come over to you and I go, dude, I sold this script to Sony. And you literally are like, oh, come on, dude.
Yeah,
like,
no
what?
chance. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, no. They're like, come on. They're like literally giving me the come on face. Like, dude, it's sad when you do this. And I'm like, no, I'm telling you, I did. Like, it's going to come out in the trades. Like, I sold the script to Sony. Because you have to think, like, at this point, I'm this kid that's, like, from Gander that made one short film and then another short film in the CFC. And nobody sees me because all I do is sit in my basement and paint and write. That's all I do. Like, I always say to people with no exaggeration that, like, when I was, like, 17, I spent 90% of my time by myself and 10% of my time around people. And then as soon as I became a filmmaker, that literally flipped. Like I literally was like desperate to spend time by myself, and 90% of the time just like people asking me questions and stuff, and like, you know, whatever, like doing press and that, all that kind of stuff. And so what it was that because no one saw me, they just assumed I was like drinking or smoking weed or something stupid, and I was just like trying to write and literally like trying to have a career, you know, between beers. Let's be honest. You know.
Oh, you are Canadian. I'm
Canadian. I was 18 or 22 years. I was a kid, man. So it was like, yeah. So that happened, and so that was the thing that I ran into. Was I just had like a bunch of people thinking I was lying. I remember too. Like I quit. I worked in a movie theater. I'm pretty sure it was called the Uptown.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I worked there, and I was so happy because the manager at the Uptown. He looked like the sad guy from Sloane with the dark hair and the glasses, right? But he was a total job's worth, and he was only like 4 years older than me. So he was like this guy that wore a suit and was a manager, and he was 4 years older than me, and he just loved telling me what to do. Like, Brad, you need to go sweep that aisle. And you're like, oh, dude, you could just say it like a normal human being, you know? Like, you're only 4 years. And I remember going to him and like came in so happy, and I was like, I think I sold the script, and he was like, "That's really again like, sure, that's really
good
nice.
For you, good for you,
yeah, good for you, right, nice kid." And I was like, okay, and I was so excited because again like not coming from any amount of money whatsoever, I was like, I'm gonna wait to make sure that check hits my account, and then I'm gonna quit. And so like 2 weeks later, the check hit my account, and I walked in and I was like, I'm out. and he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I sold that script, remember? And he was like, Brad,
Yeah.
seriously. I was like, gotta go. And I just walked. I was like, I'm done. I'm totally done, because this guy was like a total dick to me for no reason. Whatever, because he was my boss, I guess. But
Now, somebody asked in the comments, and I was going to ask it anyways, but did the script that you sold to Sony, did it get made?
no, I completely messed up the rewrite. Well, see, I was actually thinking about this the other day, because I just finished a rewrite now for on a pilot, a TV pilot, and you know, when you're starting off, you just don't know what you don't know, and you're so eager to try to please. And I felt like, wow, I'm in the big leagues and I can't mess this up. And so I just did all their notes, and I should have not did half their notes. You know, I should have pushed back, and I knowing what I know now, I probably would have been able to decipher the good and bad notes, you know, and I just did everything, and it totally sent it in a screwy direction. And I messed that up, but I had no idea I was messing. I was doing my best, but I just didn't know enough to not mess it up, really.
All right, I'm going to put the film and television making on hold for a second here, because it's funny. As I've been doing the show longer and longer, I realize that these hours fly by, and I look over, I'm like, man, we only got like 24 minutes left until Instagram kicks us off.
Right.
So I want to go back to the film in a second, but it might be a good time to pause, because I think, you know, chronologically here, we're right around 2002-ish, 2001, 2002. So you're in Toronto,
yeah,
and I want to ask you a two-part question, but two completely opposite, you know, completely different questions here.
Sure.
One being, is that where the fandom for the Raptors started? Because for folks that are watching, Brad is a massive Toronto Raptors fan. Did that start in Gander, or did it start once you got to Toronto and saw this team grow and now you're in the city? And then in addition to that, here you are in 2001 and you're in Toronto watching the Raptors at a pretty good time in the franchise, but back home, 9/11 happens, and Gander now is on the world stage, the world map, because of all the flights that are coming in. And of course, now we know Come From Away, the play that's out, and international success with that. And I've got to imagine you knew a hell of a lot of people that would have been involved back in Gander with everything that went down with Gander's involvement, again, kind of becoming the secondary home for so many people around the world.
Yeah. The first part was very easy for this one. I was in Toronto in '95 when the Raptors started. So I was never really. I played hockey, like I grew up in the sticks, and so we had a pond in my backyard. So I played hockey, like not organized hockey, as a kid. And then I played basketball in high school. So I loved basketball. I started in junior high and played through high school. And I just completely and totally fell in love with the sport. And it was like the only sport I'd ever been really kind of decent at, because, I don't know, the hockey vibe wasn't for me, just the kind of machismo-y kind of thing. And with basketball, you could just go to a court and shoot around. It was like so simple and so easy and fun. And, you know, it was a very much like a skill game. You didn't have to be, obviously it helps in certain positions to be gigantic, but you could play well and not necessarily, and I was 6'1", so for like an average Canadian, I was, you know, pretty tall and young, so I could, like, you know, grab a rim or whatever. So I played all the time, and when the Raptors formed, just instantly it was I'm a massive Raptors fan. Like, you know, I go to every game I can. I go courtside in California. I fly to playoff games. Like, I do everything I can. I have whatever, you know, you've hooked me up. I got signed jersey, and I spent too much money on jerseys. You know, I've done everything I can. And it's the only team I've ever followed. It's the only team I've ever followed in my life. I had a Yeri Curry Oilers jersey. Yeah. As a little kid. Yeah. And then I went to a Raptors jersey. Wow. So that's it. That's all I've ever followed. And so to me, it's like being in that city at that time. And I remember going to the Sky Dome, and you could buy like tickets for like $12 and sit way. And I remember seeing them beat the Timberwolves with Garnett in double overtime in the nosebleeds in the Sky Dome. And it was like we'd won the championship. Everyone went bananas, because we probably won like 11 games. You know, like everyone went bananas. I probably went to like 25 games in that first season, you know, because it was just like grew up in Gander, Newfoundland, and moved to Toronto, and suddenly there's an NBA team. I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is the best. I still think the Raptors and the Grizzlies have the two best jerseys of all time. I think that the Grizzlies jerseys with those little details, you know, like the native kind of influence.
Absolutely. Yep.
And the bear holding the ball. I'm like, that jersey is amazing. Like, it's too bad the team didn't stick around, but that jersey is like fucking legit.
The team never should have left either, but that's another story for another day. But
for a different Instagram live. But yeah,
no, we can get into it. But that was the owner, Micah Heisley, fleecing the entire city, and I still say to this day, worst trade in NBA history is Vancouver for Memphis. I don't care about players. The cities trade Vancouver for Memphis, worst trade in NBA history.
Yeah, I would be in Vancouver. I don't care what anyone says about the weather. I would take it in a heartbeat. But just the second part of it, the 9/11 thing, like, that was really surreal for me. I wasn't there. I was in Toronto when it happened.
Yeah.
It was during the film festival. And the thing that struck me about the actual moment was I thought, it's going to be like a world war. That's what I thought.
So did I.
I was like, oh my God, I can't. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get drafted or some crazy. I was a kid.
Dude, I'm hosting the evening radio show on the Fan 590 at the time with Bill Hayes. And I did it for 4 or 5 years. But when we went on the air for those 2-3 weeks after the attacks in New York, that was the number one thing on my mind while I'm hosting like a 4-hour radio show. I'm 26 years old, and I'm thinking, I'm going to get drafted. We are everything you just said, word for word.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the exact same thing because I'm 26 years old, and we are on the verge of World War III.
Yeah.
And I am not ready for this at all. I'm going to be like coming up with a limp or something. I'm not ready for this. I'm just a radio guy. What are you talking about?
I was telling my roommate, I'm like, we're going back to Newfoundland because they're going to have to come find me to get me to go to this. Like, I am not suited. I'm like this long hair, skinny kid who is trying to become a director. I was like, I'm not the one you want to send. Scared the hell out of me. I don't think anyone was ready for those images, you know, and seeing them real time was just like, it's shocking to the core where you just see your life go, everything's going to change now, you know, to a much more drastic degree than it even did. And it really did change everything for a lot of people. And, you know, you see how air travel changed and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I thought my life was going to go in a completely different direction. And then, you know, obviously it didn't. But the thing that my parents lived there, my younger sister lived there, and they would send me photos, and I got all the stories. So it's like, the stuff that you see in Come From Away, that's like half the stories, you know, like my parents told me like tons of stories that musical is great. And it does a very good job of capturing the spirit of it. And a lot of the specificities of the people. And like, for example, there's a cop in it named Oz Fudge. That guy tried to arrest me as a kid for drinking in public. So when I saw it, I was like, I know that guy. He tried to arrest me for drinking in public. I wasn't drinking in public. My friends were. You can't. What are you going to arrest me for anyway, Officer Fudge? Yeah. But he was, you know, watching it. I was like, oh my God, like I know these people. You know, sitting in LA with my parents watching this at Christmas, watching Come From Away.
Wow.
But the thing that they said to me that really struck them, that my dad just couldn't fathom and shake, was that he said that the population doubled overnight. So Gander's pretty small, like it's kind of expansive, like in terms of a small town, it kind of goes off and there's like lots of little areas, but downtown's pretty small. And you don't see a lot of people walking around, you know, because the town square is somewhere you drive in and park and do your shopping, and drive to a mall and park and do your shopping. It's not like a walking district, you know, per se.
Right.
It's not like a tourism town or something. And my parents just said, you can't go anywhere without seeing 50 people. And so for Gander, my parents were just like, everywhere you look, there's just people walking. And it was like a city had suddenly formed overnight. Because if you think of a town of 9,000 people, suddenly goes to a town of 20,000 people, what that would feel like to the residents. And it kind of blew them away. They never lived in a city. St. John's is the biggest city. St. John's will have moments during the day that feel busy, but it's not a busy place. It's 250,000 people. And so for that town to suddenly double its population overnight, literally overnight, it was the shocking thing for them. They sent me pictures, and I'd never seen Gander look that way. And also, like, it wasn't just like, you know, Anglo-Saxons. There was like a flight from Egypt. You know, there was
Yeah.
people from all over the world. So for a small community in the middle of Newfoundland with like look at us, the palest human beings on the planet, and then suddenly it's like all these people from around the world. It was, you know, it was sort of like it just shocked them. Like they just were like they were seeing their town in a way that they never saw it before and probably ever will again.
All right, I'm gonna tell one quick story about the basketball for a second, and hopefully you won't mind me doing so. But the first time I met Brad was actually in Los Angeles at UCLA when he and Andrew Lockington, a colleague of his and a guy that I've gotten to know as well, showed up at a Raptor practice at UCLA because Andrew has become friends with former Raptors assistant coach Rex Kalamian because they live close together in Toronto.
Yeah.
So that's where I met you. But to me, the thing that stands out most about you, and maybe it's just it shows the Canadian in you. Here's a guy, and we're going to get to this in a second. Here's a guy that you know has made 3 different movies with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and you know, critically acclaimed, and television shows, Frontier and Daybreak, and all sorts of films and movies and television shows and whatnot. And yet, Brad is standing outside the hotel in Milwaukee with the rest of the autograph seekers, from the 12-year-olds to the 8-year-olds to the 30-year-olds that are doing it professionally for a living, with the binder and trying to get all the cards signed. And there's Brad standing there with his jersey waiting to get an autograph when we were in Milwaukee last year in the conference finals getting set for the Raptors and Bucks. And I witnessed it myself, and I went over to the security guy for the Raptors and said, just so you know, I mean, I listen, he's not saying this, it's me. This guy's actually like a pretty big director in Hollywood. Like, you know, could we maybe hook him up with an autograph or something? Or, you know, but hey, I don't want any special treatment. No. Just leave me here. And you're like a kid in a candy store leaning over those railings as the guys are coming out of the hotel to get onto the bus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a real fan. You know, like I love it. I mean, look, as a filmmaker, you get access to behind the scenes, right? Like you know, I shot in Hawaii for Journey 2. It was my second movie, and we got to see Hawaii, parts of Hawaii that people don't get to see. And so I learned to appreciate that access and appreciate like these different aspects of life that I never imagined growing up in Gander I was ever going to get. And to just be like an arrogant, you know, Hollywood person and just be like, expect like, well, someone should just get me in there is like, well, I kind of want to experience all of it because I guess I could probably pull some strings and make something happen if I wanted to be. I also don't want to be like douchey and do that stuff. Like I don't know. It's like cringeworthy. I'd rather experience all of it. Honestly, I'd rather like be with the fans and see what they see. And then I knew that when I got those tickets in Milwaukee through an actor buddy of mine, PJ Byrne, who was in Rampage. He was Dwayne's friend at the beginning who worked at the zoo with him. And PJ has been on Vinyl. PJ's been in like a billion things. PJ has a running joke, but he's going to make it happen. He's going to have the longest IMDb of all actors ever because he literally is in everything. Like he's in Green Book for a scene. He's in everything. And I said to PJ, I'm like, man, I want to go to Milwaukee and see the Raptors. He's like, oh, I know the guy who's the head of. So, you know, I knew I was getting hooked up with like, you know, I was going to have an experience in Milwaukee. I knew that was happening. But I was like, I'm also interested in being amongst the fans because in that hotel, man, there were the coolest Raptor fans drinking before the game, and you could hang out with people from Edmonton and all. And you know, like I would just say, hey, I'm from Newfoundland. That's all I said to them. Oh, I was in LA, but I'm from Newfoundland. You know, and so like you could just talk to people, and I'd rather people not know I was a Hollywood filmmaker. You know, I'd rather just chat with them. So yeah, it comes from this like I want like all these different experiences, you know. I'm glad that you appreciated it though, because it was very cold.
I thought it was amazing.
It was cold. It was really cold in Milwaukee, and I was like, and only Marc Gasol is Marc stopped and signed people's stuff. Marc was like,
hey man, it's the conference finals, man. It's like zero focused in, boom, onto the bus.
Marc Gasol don't need that focus. Marc Gasol can focus on everything. Marc Gasol's dialed in on every aspect of life. Now, Marc was, I thought it was amazing because he just was like, he played his ass off, but he was so I mean, he'd probably just done it so much, you know, like he seemed like that old vet who was just like, yeah, this is great. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was just enjoying everything. And then when I saw him on that bus at the championship parade, I really knew Marc Gasol knew how to enjoy everything.
Yeah. Well, and I was on that bus with him for the last 2 hours of the parade, so I got to witness that up close and personal. So,
so
yeah. And we were talking about Andrew Lockington, and Andrew just wrote in that was Mark's worst game of the series. So maybe he shouldn't have stopped. Obviously, yet again, my timing, my planning isn't great on this, but that said, I've enjoyed all the stories. So we only have about 10 minutes left, and we haven't really gotten to, oh yeah, by the way, we were in 02. And you're making a couple of short films, and they're critically acclaimed. But all right, now I'm going to just say, unfairly, fast forward a decade, and everything that happened in 10 years. How do you go from being a dude that went from Gander to Halifax to Toronto to Humber Night School to Ryerson to drop out to film school, and a decade later, you're making your first of 3 films with one of the biggest stars in the world then and now to this day, and now you've done, as I say, 3 different films with them, and your career, the way it's just taken off in Hollywood.
And
wrap that up in about 8 minutes.
Yeah. Well, listen, I will say this. Dwayne, he just come off Fast 5. So he wasn't quite the movie star that now he's...
Yeah, now he's...
biggest movie star in the world, you know, arguably, or whatever, in the top 5, if not the number 1. So I was a fan of Dwayne's forever. It's really weird how life works, but like Dwayne wasn't like, you know, looked at as this like big star, you know, like early on when I lived in Toronto, he was not, but I saw an interview with him when he did the Gridiron Gang, and I thought, this guy is genuine. This guy is talented. I don't know why. I guess it was the people, you know, people like to shit on the wrestling of it all, but I mean, you do what you got to do to like figure it out and get where you got to go. And life is a long road, man. Like you don't do something because some people are going to like turn their nose up at you. You do what you can to get ahead and like follow your passions. And so I didn't have any of this bias about wrestling or any of that. When I saw this interview, I got inspired because I was like, this guy seems like someone that I'd like to work with. And it was really weird because, you know, there's probably like 5 people at that time. I was like, oh, I really want to work with them. And I would talk to other people in film school. And I would say, you know, like, I really like Dwayne Johnson. And of course it was like, you know, whatever. He's not whoever was the big thing, like Leonardo DiCaprio is now, or whatever, who was winning Oscars, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis or whatever. And then when that happened, I was like overjoyed because I was like, this secretly is someone that I've always been a fan of. And I've always wanted to work with him. And I didn't want to become a giant nerd, but what I was really fortunate about with Dwayne was that he was on an upward trajectory and he was becoming a big star and a bigger and bigger and a mega star at almost the same time that I was on an upward trajectory, right? So like the difference between Dwayne as a star between Journey 2 and then San Andreas and Rampage, each were monumentally different in terms of like his life, his stardom, all of those things. So what I really liked about our working relationship is that we were both really, really hungry. I think, you know, him to prove himself as an actor and me to prove myself as a director. And we got along really well, and just on that kind of like outworking other people basis. And that's where I think a lot of the synergy came, and why we kept working together through that period is because of that, you know, because there was a shared passion. And I think he was trying to, I don't want to speak for him, but I feel like we were just trying to prove ourselves on the biggest stage possible. And of course, with success, you get other opportunities and bigger opportunities. So that's sort of how that rolled. And then in between movies, I mean, I had to fight to do a TV show. Like I had to fight to do Frontier because, you know, it's like everything else. Like you've never done a TV show and they'll be like, well, you just do big movies. And you're like, but I want to do the show, you know, like, so nothing has ever come easy. And so everything that wasn't, you know, working with Dwayne, all those other things like Daybreak and Frontier and all those other projects in between was just me like pounding the pavement and really trying to work for ends. I didn't really form a lot of like really strong relationships in Hollywood early, which has changed now because I've been around and I've recognize people who are really smart and really good, and I've got like really good relationships around town. But I had my nose to the grindstone so hard to get those 3 movies done and to make them really, really count. Again, like my learning curve has been so steep in this industry, right? Like if you think about like a short film to get to make Evelyn, I make Evelyn, I sell a feature script to Sony, I get Cats and Dogs 2 a year later, my first movie. I'm like 26 years old, it's $80 million movie. To then get Journey 2, to then get San Andreas, to then do a little horror film right after San Andreas, pre-Rampage, and then between those 2 movies do Frontier, and then do Daybreak. Like just nonstop. I'm trying to make stuff. Like you don't have as much time as. And I'm not like Hollywood in that way of like going out and doing drinks and schmoozing and stuff. I've gotten better at like separating the actual work and the time you put in to like build relationships, you know. But honestly, like I spent so much time trying to be really good at my craft that I probably overlooked that part of the industry. Now with hindsight, now knowing what I kind of know now. And so it was just, a lot of it was, I mean, it's maybe cheesy and simplistic, but, you know, it was just, I was just hungry to prove I was good, you know, and I just was like, I just gave it everything I had with the resources that were given me to try to make it the best thing I could make it every single time I got up to the plate, because I kept feeling like, and I still feel this way, I still carry this like, if you don't hit a home run, you're going to get dumped to the minors kind of mentality, you know, and I just can't shake that. And I'm not okay with failure when it comes to creative endeavors. I just don't do well with it. And so it forces me to invest in my work in a way that is probably going to end up paying for some psychiatrist bills down the road, you know, but, it's just following my passion to try to do the best thing I could do. And that's where that really intense run of movies, I think, kind of came from.
Let me ask you this. There's only about 3 minutes left. And listen, I would go longer, but Instagram literally kicks us off. I don't know if you've done this, but the clock comes up with 30 seconds and we're done. So
no idea.
Based on that mentality that you just talked about, how difficult, how frustrating is it to know that Daybreak, you know, which had so much popularity and so much feedback from the fan base, and all of a sudden, and I'm surprised by it, that there's no second season.
It was
like I was shocked when I heard that.
I'm still kind of shocked by it. I haven't gotten the analytics from Netflix. I was told that our numbers were not what they wanted them to be. I think our numbers were good. I think they probably, there's that gap between what you are and expectation, and that gap is where, like, you know, that's where I think we didn't get a second season, is because their expectations were so high. And I think that was the mistake with the show. I have a hard time dealing with Daybreak because I have never had so much fan engagement on anything. If you added up all my Dwayne movies, Daybreak had more fan engagement with me. So for me, I was like mystified by it. I couldn't understand it. I was so proud of the show. I worked 7 years to get that to go to the air. I optioned that book out of my own money, that graphic novel. I sat on it for 7 years. I tried to make it into a movie. I then tried to make it into a TV show. I then eventually brought on a co-writer. I did everything I could to make that show. So to not get a second season was, and still is, mystifying to me on some level. And at some point, I'd love to get the analytics on it so I could understand. But at the same time, it's like sometimes it doesn't click, and you just have to move on. Because you can't control it, you know?
Yep. Last one for you here, because I think we're into the final minute. Next project coming out, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Sweet Girl with Jason Momoa, or is there, yeah?
Yeah, so we have a movie coming out called Sweet Girl that I produced with my producing partner, Jeff Fearson. So I have a company called ASAP Entertainment. We produced it. I didn't direct it. Jeff found the script. I work with the writers to do the rewrite. So a lot of times what we do now is we find material or invent material, develop it internally, and then bring it out to people. So if I had the right thing for Jason, or the right thing for Dwayne, or the right thing for anybody that I know, I then bring it to them when it's in the right place. Or, you know, looking down the road at these stars where they have to like plan like 2 years out for the job because they've lined up so much work. And Sweet Girl came together because Jason really loved that script, and he has a friend that's been directing commercials with him named Brian Mendoza, who's a great guy.
We have 15 seconds left.
Okay. Brian Mendoza directed it. Jason's starring in it. It's coming out on Netflix soon. It's going to be great.
I got to get you back again. I keep saying that to everybody. Brad, thanks for this, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's fun.
Stay safe and healthy. Thanks for joining us.
All right, you too, man.
All right.